Part 2, Chapter 5. That season with the Redwood City Reds was tough. I wanted to make myself a better player, but there was nobody to talk to for advice. Take bunting. I read in books that you had to get the bat head out front, but I didn't know what that meant. When I asked Coach Loeffler, he stuck me in the batting cages and had me bunt 10 times. He'd yell, "Good bunt!" if the ball was fair, or "You can do better!" if the ball dribbled foul. That was his idea of teaching. Eventually I figured out that getting the bat out in front means you've got to get your bat into fair territory and bunt the ball before it reaches home plate. But figuring things out on my own made for slow going. It didn't help that our team was full of holes. We didn't have any speed, and without Jimmy we didn't have a power RBI guy. Our first baseman had hands of stone, and our center fielder shied away from line drives. As the losses piled up, I'd whine at home about what a terrible coach Loeffler was. I suppose I was trying to make my mother feel bad about not letting me play on the Belmont Braves, though I don't know why. A couple of days after Jimmy's phone call, I'd seen Mr. Mongolin at Safeway. The second I saw him, I found myself thinking that he was a cheater, and I knew right then and there that I didn't ever want anybody to look at me and think, he is a cheater. Part 2, Chapter 6. One game on our schedule was special, the game against the Belmont Braves. When it was a month away, I was looking forward to it the way you look forward to your birthday. When it was 2 weeks off, I felt a kind of nervousness creeping over me. The final week before the game, I was almost sick. Getting to see Jimmy again was a big deal for me. But what if it was no big deal for him? What if he saw me and nodded, and that was that? I didn't have any real friends on the Redwood City Reds, but that didn't mean Jimmy hadn't made new friends. Through him, I'd learned everything I knew about baseball, but I hadn't taught him anything. The day of the game, I headed over to the park 2 hours early. I thought I'd be the first guy there, but Jimmy was already hitting balls off a tee in the batting cage. I stood off and watched him for 5 minutes or so. His swing was sweet. I'd forgotten how sweet. But there was a crazy fury in him, too. That craziness had always been there, I guess, only now it was right there, right out front, instead of hiding. I kept thinking he'd see me, but he never did. He ripped ball after ball in the batting cages, retrieved them, smacked them again. It was like he was trying to batter the ball into oblivion. "Hey, Jimmy," I finally called out. "What's up?" He jumped a little, but when he saw it was me, his face relaxed. "Seth, I was hoping you'd show up early. How's it going?" "Okay. How about with you?" He nodded. "Okay. Want to play a little catch?" I've played catch a million times, but that time it was special. It was just him and me, and a little wind and the wet grass. As we tossed the ball back and forth, neither of us said a word, but it was like getting to know him again. The way he turned his shoulder in before he threw, the little flip of the glove he gave as he caught the ball, things like that were better than a lot of talk. Pretty soon, other guys started showing up. I tried tuning them out, and I think Jimmy did too. Finally, his coach blew a whistle. "Belmont Braves over here!" There was no tuning that out. I threw the ball to Jimmy one final time. "Good luck," I said. He laughed. "You're going to need the luck." Then he pulled a little grass out of the ground, tossed it in the air. "Watch out for the pop-ups, Seth. The wind is swirly today." I nodded before heading to my teammates. We started hot. A walk, an error, another walk to me, and a long double brought across 3 runs in the first. Our pitcher held Belmont scoreless the first 2 innings, even though Jimmy drove a triple to the base of the fence in his first at-bat. Heading to the third, I thought we might pull off the upset. But baseball can drive you crazy. A bloop hit, that's what did us in. A little broken bat job that plopped onto the grass in left field, barely 2 feet out of our third baseman's reach. That bloop hit came with 2 out in the third, and after that came everything. The Braves whistled base hits all over the park, line shots down the right field line, long fly balls into the power alleys, grounders through the hole. With 5 runs in, Jimmy unloaded a 3-run homer to left. Belmont scored 4 more in the 4th, 3 in the 5th. It was a laughter for them. For us, it was torture. The innings crawled by. Jimmy was amazing, though. With his team way ahead, you'd think he'd let up a little, but he didn't. In the field, he kept his glove down in the dirt, his eyes on the batter. anticipating, always anticipating. The score was 15-4 in the sixth when Jimmy banged out his fourth hit, a one-out single to right. As he led off first, I looked over at him. I couldn't yell out, "Way to go!" but I wanted to catch his eye to give him a nod that meant the same thing. That's why my head wasn't into the game, why I wasn't ready for the ground ball that came, a perfect two-hopper that should have resulted in an easy twin killing. I didn't charge the ball like I should have, and I double-clutched before I unloaded to Brad Coman, who was covering second. I relived the next moment a million times. I can still see Coman pivot. I can still see Jimmy barreling it on him, and I can still see Coman pinwheeling into the air. But most of all, I remember Coman landing, and the weird way his knee bent under him, and the sound it made, a popping sound I've never heard, before or since. Coman lay still, a glazed look on his face. Both coaches rushed out. "Somebody call 911!" Loeffler yelled. Within minutes, the medic one came. One of the men gently moved Coman's lower leg. "Does that hurt?" he asked. "No," Coman said, his face white. "I don't feel anything." As they lifted him onto the stretcher, his lower leg flopped like a strand of cooked spaghetti. Jimmy was standing off by himself. I worked my way over to him. "Don't feel bad, it wasn't your fault." He wheeled on me, and I felt those eyes again. It was his own fault. He should have been off the bag. The aid car roared off, siren wailing. The game was called. As I packed up my equipment bag, the guys on my team were cursing Jimmy, talking about what a dirty player he was. I didn't say anything to them, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Coaches say you're supposed to give it your all, every minute of every game, and that's what Jimmy did, and it's stupid. And coaches shouldn't say it. With the score the way it was, Jimmy should have peeled off center field, or slid so that his foot just reached the bag. If he'd done either of those things, Coman wouldn't have spent the summer on crutches. But Jimmy wasn't the only one to blame. I should have been on my toes, playing the game, not back on my heels, being a cheerleader for Jimmy. If I'd charged that ball and gotten my throw off cleanly, nothing would have happened. And it was Coman's fault, too. We weren't little kids playing our first game. The second I double-clutched on the throw, Coman should have known he didn't have a prayer to turn a double play. He should have stepped on the bag and gotten off as fast as he could. The throw to first did him in, and that throw was bad baseball. I visited Coman in the hospital. He was down in the dumps. His knee was going to need an operation. He didn't know when he was getting out or how much physical therapy he was going to have to do. I hung around for half hour or so, listening and not saying much, before heading for the door. "Only one other guy has even visited me," Coman said, before I made it. "Who's that?" I asked. "The guy who nailed me." "Jimmy Winter?" I replied, amazed. "Yeah, that's the guy. You know him?" "Yeah, I know him. What did he say?" Coman frowned. "Not much. He said he was sorry, but then he told me I shouldn't have been on the bag. He wasn't here 2 minutes. I stared at Coman, lying there in the big white bed. He didn't understand how hard it must have been for Jimmy to do what he'd done, and he wasn't in the mood to listen to me explain it to him. I guess if my leg looked like his, I wouldn't have wanted to hear it either. "Hey, you'll come again, won't you?" Coman yelled as I stepped into the hallway. "Sure, I'll come again. You can count on it." I meant to keep that promise. I planned to go back to the hospital or visit Coman at home, but I never made it. I've played a lot of baseball since then, in leagues and in pickup games at parks. In all that time, I've never seen Coman play. I'd like to think he moved away or something. I'd hate thinking that he can't play, that his leg never got back to normal.